really, really, really want to find what I'm looking for in a 12-part book series.
16.
16-part book series.
Welcome back to another episode of Is Fitz Happy? My name is Luke.
And I'm Emma.
And today we are discussing Chapter 9.
That Suffices.
That Suffices. So the payoff of the Fool's Prophecy. First prophecy that was told to us.
Fitz.
Yeah, yes, that one. Specifically that one. And speaking of the Fool, the first introduction to this chapter is all about rumors of his origin.
Yes, which I'm super excited to talk about. Just because I love the Fool, so I like talking about him, because we get so little about him anyway. I mean...
just in little drips here and there, spread across the whole series.
Mm-hmm. So it's kind of fun to gossip about where he comes from.
It says he came to Buckkeep in the 17th year of King Shrewd's rule, but that doesn't really mean anything to us, because one, we don't know how long King Shrewd actually ruled.
Or what the year of his ruling is now.
Yep. Or when that was in context to when Fitz is alive.
Right.
Or doing anything.
Yeah, it's a little frustrating as a measurement, because there is nowhere else, I'm pretty sure, in the series where we use any sort of year measurement, right?
Oh yeah, there's no years really. It's all kind of vague.
The year of our Lord 17.
King Shrewd, our Lord. Even if we knew how old Shrewd was when he became king, we could kind of ballpark it, but I wasn't able to find that either.
Yeah.
It might be somewhere, but it's very hard to find anything in 16 books. So
yeah. It's a lot of words to comb through.
Yeah. It goes through a lot of different theories that people have, rumors, things like that. But it says in here that we have no real knowledge of the Fool's life before his arrival at King Shrewd's court. And we kind of get... like we said before, little drips of knowledge through the Fool. And we know that he was born in a far-off south village to two fathers and a mother.
Yes.
And when he was still young, he got sent off to Claris and learned about prophecy and stuff, was treated pretty badly, left because he believed he was the true white prophet.
Yes.
And found his way to Jamalia. And then I think Shrewd bought him off of some Chalced traders or something like that, because I think he found his way to Chalced.
I thought he came to Shrewd pretending to be a gift from somewhere.
Possibly.
And
I don't remember.
There was no real exchange. He just said that he was a gift. I'm pretty sure. I could not find this either. And
we spent about an hour and a half before this episode just combing through different books. I was word searching on my ebooks and things like that, and we couldn't find a specific conversation.
Yeah.
Unfortunately. So hopefully we can get a correction to you, or one of you guys can reach out to us and let us know where exactly the Fool talks about his journey to Buckkeep, because we know kind of the starting and the end points, but we don't know where he discusses that. So reach out to us, isfitshappy@gmail.com, or DM us or message us on any of our social medias.
Yes.
So he gets to Buckkeep and then he's there, but all of this is unknown to the court because he eventually trusts Fitz enough to tell him that. But at this point, no one really knows.
Yeah, he's an enigma.
Yeah.
But I do want to quick ask. So one of the rumors is that the Fool was a captive of the Red Ship Raiders, and that the Bingtown traders came and seized him from them. And so I'm wondering, does this mean that the Bingtown traders are also dealing with the Red Ship Raiders?
I think it's just kind of a combination of stuff. It might be, but
Just another fanciful tale.
Yeah, I'm guessing it was more so like Bingtown traders came up and it kind of got mingled in the same conversation because it was the same kind of years that the Red Ship Raiders were uptaking their raids.
Okay.
So I feel like when they came, they were probably discussing, oh, yeah, those raiders are really bad out on the sea right now. But they never really had to deal with it because, you know, it was further south. And
right.
I think it's south. Am I getting my geography mixed up now?
Let me check the map. Handy dandy map.
Pretty sure it's south. Almost 100% positive.
Yes.
Perfect.
It is.
I can remember some things at least. I think they're too far south and they have to deal with the pirate isles anyways.
And also Chalced, because they are always feuding with Chalced. But
yeah, exactly. And the Out Islanders are raid oriented, not like warships for deep sea travel and long distance.
I guess it could be similar to like the pirate problem. So if the traders come through, they're getting...
Yeah, they're still getting harried and whatever.
Right. Okay.
So I kind of feel like it got conflated and those kind of got combined, just like all rumors do.
Yeah. But I do like the imagery of a baby floating down a waterway in a boat with a shark skin parasol.
Yes.
Very Grinch-esque.
Or, you know, any other myth.
I guess.
Okay.
I don't know. I'm imagining the basket from The Grinch, but do as you please with your imagery.
It does say that the gender of the fool has been disputed, and this is a big thing that pops up over this series, and I kind of want to touch on it right now as well.
Yeah.
So the fool is always referred to as he, him, and that's what Fitz thinks of the fool in general.
Yes.
Amber is always a she, and in my mind, that is correct. Like, both of them are correct. The pale woman refers to him as beloved and as a him, as a he.
Yeah. Well, beloved isn't necessarily feminine.
Right, but she does refer to him as a he.
Oh, right, yeah.
But the fool also says that, like, since his people are so vastly different, I think he mentioned something like his anatomy is as similar to Fitz's as Fitz is to Night Eyes. Like, they're so vastly different species that I don't even know if it matters.
Yeah.
In my mind, it's just like his personas are the individual
facets of himself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I agree. I think it's, up to him and whatever he wants to go by at any given time. And I don't know. It is super confusing sometimes. And I definitely struggled throughout, I think, the whole series the first time I read it with, oh, this totally means that he's actually a she. I know it. And then something else would happen, like, oh, well, now I know he's definitely he. And less and less sure.
I remember in the end, in Assassin's Quest, when we meet Starling and she is convinced that the fool is a woman. You were like, I knew it. I knew he was a woman the whole time and all this kind of stuff. And then afterwards it like didn't matter. And then he was Amber the next series. And then he was back to Lord Golden. And you're just like, well, I don't know anymore.
I mean, it doesn't really matter. And like he says, it's no one's business but his own.
Yeah, exactly.
But it is like definitely something that I think
it needs to be discussed because his emotions and feelings towards that are very, very involved in the relationship between him and the fool.
Yeah.
It's literally like 50% of the betrayal he feels in the Tawny Man series is that. So
yeah.
I don't know. It's kind of it's interesting that it's brought up right now.
That's true. Yeah.
Because it's not really talked about.
I wonder if, now this is pure speculation and based off of nothing, but I wonder if Fitz, like, maybe at the time of writing this little excerpt, is struggling with the fact that he has a crush on the Fool, because I feel like there is some sort of romantic feeling between Fitz and the Fool, just personal opinion. And I wonder if because he identifies as a straight man and he like doesn't see himself as liking other guys, that he's trying to rationalize, well, maybe he's a she and that makes sense, but he doesn't quite know how to work out his feelings, as we all know. So he's like, well, who knows? You know, I don't know if that makes sense, but
see, I'm of the camp that while Fitz feels a deep love for the Fool, he doesn't feel any physical or sexual attraction. I think he sees beauty in the Fool,
right,
but not attraction. So we're kind of,
yeah,
we'll see how that plays out in the future books while their relationship develops a little bit more,
because they barely know each other now. So.
Yeah, they both think each other are idiots and are,
which one of them is correct, and it's not Fitz.
All right, so kind of goes on, and basically it sets up this chapter by saying, oh yeah, he's predicted a bunch of stuff, and people brush it off like he's saying just a bunch of ridiculous, crazy, vague things, and then he can say I told you so to whatever happens later. But the last sentence in here says, but in many well-witnessed cases he has predicted, however obscurely, events that later came to pass. And as all of you have read this before, this chapter, Fat Suffices, is where Fitz saves Lady Grace's dog.
Yes.
Her feist with butter.
And we also see the little doubt that maybe the Fool isn't a prophet of any sort, which kind of sticks with Fitz, I think, throughout their whole relationship of he wants to believe his friend, but isn't sure he can.
Yeah, and I think he fully leans into it in the Tawny Man trilogy, like near the end. But before that, it's just kind of like, I guess maybe. I'm a catalyst.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Definitely. Also, just real quick, I wanted to point out that other folk are mentioned.
Yeah.
Because people don't think the Fool is an other folk, but they're not quite sure what he is. But I just thought it was really cool that we see other folk, which I had to double check that I wasn't misremembering, but these are the creatures that are on the other island.
The others, yes.
Yeah.
That we meet in, I think, the first chapter of Live Ship Traders with Kenneth.
I don't know. Maybe.
I don't know if he's the first chapter or the first time we meet Kenneth.
Yeah.
Yes.
But also weird that it's just known in the duchies, and that it's known that they're so afraid of cats, which I think is a fact that comes in again whenever Kenneth is there. Yeah. And it's just like crazy. It's so weird to see the little tiny details that come in again.
I'm kind of
later.
Now that you just mentioned that, it just brought to mind other things that are weird about cats, and they speak to everybody that are witted. All of cats do. So I'm wondering if it's kind of like that, since the wit and skill are kind of similar, like you mentioned in the Circle of Magic. Yeah. And how dragons talk through their minds, and others are deformed dragons that have spent too much time around humans basically before they were birthed or whatever. I think that's how that works for the others. I'm wondering if like they're afraid of cats because cats can like just speak to them directly in their minds instead of talking. I don't know. Like
maybe it's because cats like don't care for their glamour and don't fall for it. I feel like of every animal, a cat would be the least likely to fall for glamour. They just don't care. True. I don't know.
But that just brought to mind because they are unique in that sense and brought up as unique in that sense. And now it's, prominently mentioned that they're afraid of cats. So
yeah, I don't know.
Anyways, we get to Fitz waking up in the middle of the night because he's hungry.
Yes.
And I mentioned hunger a lot last episode because of Lady Time keeping him busy, because he had to learn manners and eat slowly at dinner, and all sorts of things like that. He kept complaining about the fancy food and not being, proper soldiers' rations.
Which you would think it would be fun to try new foods that are fancy, but no.
Well, if you were starving and you couldn't eat breakfast for 2 days straight, I think you wouldn't want to have fancy food either.
Far from starving, but he is a growing young boy, so I'll give it to him.
He's 13 years old. He could probably eat 3 meals a day. All right, so that kind of cascades and prompts this little adventure that he has, and he leaves the room, asks the soldiers which way to the kitchen because they always know where food is.
Which is a fun little, I don't know, I love that.
And I just want to highlight that he says that he was employing Chade's training to sneak through the castle. And he says that the few guards he passed were mostly dozing. None challenged me. At the time, I put it down to my stealth. Now I wonder if they considered a skinny, tousle-headed lad any threat worth bothering with. And I can just imagine in my head, because I would do the same exact thing. Sneaking through a keep late at night to get to the kitchen to get some food. That is a game. That is you being a stealthy ninja.
I just picture Kronk from Emperor's New Groove. do, 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 do. That's the imagery I get when I think of Fitz sneaking to the to the keep.
We can make fun all we want, but he is a trained assassin at this point.
That's true. You know what? Fair enough. But also, where was this floorboard knowledge when I was young and needing to sneak to the kitchen for food at midnight?
Right? Yeah.
Good to know. Floorboards are less creaky on the sides.
So he heads to the kitchen and then finds some food, and a serving girl walks in, or so he thinks.
Mm-hmm.
Carrying a baby.
And in typical Fitz fashion, she's crying, so he turns his eyes away in discomfort.
She was weeping, not even like crying, just like...
like straight up weeping, and he's like, ooh, gross emotions.
Typical Burek fashion.
He was taught well.
So, this is obviously Lady Grace and her little feist.
Except not obvious to Fitz.
Well, no, not obvious to Fitz, but to us, this is Lady Grace and her feist.
Yeah.
And the dog has a bone lodged in its throat.
Yes.
And there is a ton of very descriptive and nasty
details,
nasty details about everything that is happening to this dog.
Yeah.
And she is distraught, of course. She doesn't really know. It's kind of obvious she doesn't really know how to take care of a dog.
Yeah.
First of all.
For sure.
Second of all, she's scared out of her mind that her comfort in this new environment for her is gonna die. Because Fitz is very astute. In the last chapter, he thought she might have been raised from the common folk around the keep. And it's very obvious in this chapter that he was correct. And that she doesn't really know what she's doing. And I'm sure this dog is a super big comfort to her.
Well, yeah.
She can take care of it.
And also, dogs are just really friendly in general. And you get to cuddle and pet them. And they become part of your family. And if you're a teenage girl married to a creepy old man, I'm sure it would be comforting to have something that you could, or a friend, so to speak, especially since we know that people probably don't look on her very fondly just because she's, number one, so young, but number two, not coming from a place of wealth. So I can see why she would be so attached to this dog, but also not know anything because she's never had a dog before.
Right. I just want to kind of point out that she talks to herself and exclaims out oh, he's choking again. He's dying. My little feisty is dying and no one but me cares. He just goes on snoring and I don't know what to do and my darling is dying. And Fitz is a little boy in the corner eating stew and averting his gaze. And she's just kind of like,
she's a little bit dramatic.
yeah. I mean, to be fair, it's a terrible situation.
Yeah,
but
I would be a little dramatic too if my dog was dying.
Yeah. But Buric's training in this moment completely kicks in.
Well, I think it doesn't kick in when she says that. I think it's when the dog locks eyes with him and he feels the force of the panic and pain.
Yeah. I mean, yes. But like after that point, he is straight to the point. He's blunt. He's not even just taking care of the dog. He is mimicking Buric in all of his mannerisms. He is so
very
like,
Buric-like.
I don't care who you are. Don't look at me. You're stupid. Help me just like calm this dog down so I can fix it.
Also,
that's the only important part.
Yeah, I also like the part where he's hoping that he doesn't have to fight this girl to get to the dog to help it. Yeah. It's like, Fitz. Just use your words. It'll be fine.
And she thinks that he is a kitchen boy. Mm-hmm. So they make the same assumptions about one another.
Yeah.
Who else is in the middle of the night going to be in a kitchen?
Right.
Kind of thing. I just thought that was kind of cute that both of them were like, oh, this other person, what do they know about anything?
Uh-huh.
But he kind of diagnoses the dog, and she reveals more ignorance that she doesn't really know what she's doing. She feeds him fish and everything like that. And
with the bones still in it.
With the bones still in, yes. Just as a disclaimer, this is true. Never feed your dogs like poultry or fish bones, and don't feed them cooked bones either, because those can shatter.
Break. Yeah.
So Fitz is like, okay, I can definitely feel a bone in there. Oh, and these claws are not cut in a while either. It's tearing up my arm.
Well, could they cut dogs' paws or nails? I guess like this is basically medieval times. Did they do that, or did they just let the dogs like exercise it out?
I think let the dogs exercise it out, and Fitz is like, okay, they're way too long to have
Fair.
to be to be clipped down by the concrete or the stone.
Mm-hmm.
So he says, oh, he's Verity's dog boy. I'm here to help, but he's still like not even caring about.
Yeah. He's just saying that because he knows it'll calm her down. I mean, it's true, but it's also like probably gonna help her listen to him.
I can just imagine him staring at this dog the whole time, and her like talking at him, and him just like answering but never looking at her ever.
No eye contact.
Because otherwise he would maybe recognize her sooner.
Well, you would think he would recognize her because of the dog, but maybe that's just me. Like, how many little dogs did he see coming in? Oh, Fitz. Sometimes.
Well, he did think it was a baby first. So.
True. True.
But the dog was like all wrapped up in blankets, like so tight that you couldn't see.
Yeah,
so.
Which is also probably not great.
Yeah. So he's like, oh yeah, this bone is definitely lodged. I need something to lubricate the throat with. Finds a bunch of butter. Fat suffices. And melts it a little bit in his stew bowl that was probably still warm. And finds a metal hook, probably used for taking kettles off of fire.
Yeah, so how big is this hook supposed to be?
Yeah.
Because I'm picturing like a really large, like Captain Hook sized.
Probably a little skinnier than that, I would hope.
I know I'm wrong. But whenever he said it's used to like pull in the stew bowl, I'm picturing Captain Hook level, and I'm like, how is that gonna fit?
Like a full chain hook. Just like thick steel. No, he finds a good size hook to stick down this dog's throat and slowly pull out the bone, which works, saves the dog, and says like, don't feed them bones like this at all.
Mm-hmm.
And then says only feed him like rice and cooked meat. She does some mannerism that makes him recognize Lady Grace.
Yeah, and then he realizes that because this is Lady Grace, it's super bad that he just let this dog pee all over her.
Yeah. But she's thankful, and she asks what she can get Fitz. basically, because she's so grateful for this, and she loves having that power.
It's definitely a little bit smug.
Oh, yeah. She's like, oh, you recognized me.
Mm-hmm.
And he just straight up, like, states out, like, have your Duke man his tower.
Yeah.
And she's like, what?
Well, she's probably expecting, like, a kiss or something romantic. Like, you know, they're similar in age.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. Maybe Fitz is, like, in his gross, awkward stage, but...
I get the feeling that she is completely romanticizing her position, but is using that, like, as a front because she doesn't really know what she's doing.
Fair.
Because she was, like, flirting after Verity. She was wearing all of her jewels. I don't know. It's just... I know it's rude to say because she's ignorant, but she's so, like, so out of her element and is...
It's definitely a romanticized version of what she assumes the wealthy people are like.
Yeah. So, Fitz turns into Chade now. He switches gears after he learns it's Lady Grace. And he becomes, once again, excellent at reading people. He's like, oh, that inflection in her tone definitely makes me realize she was not, nobly born. She doesn't really know what she's doing. He kind of knows exactly what will manipulate her and directly goes for that. Yep. Saying like, oh, I dreamed this. You must do this and this and this.
And he lets his eyes unfocus and her eyes went wide. I had her.
It's really interesting how quickly he switches in between Burek and Chade in this scene. Because it's literally like flipping a switch. Yep. It's kind of crazy.
Well, one is dealing with animals and the other is with people. So.
Yeah, exactly. So this works that we see in the future, that basically he convinces her to give away her jewels to provide enough money to man and fix the duchy.
And makes it sound like a noble cause. Like that's what a real lady would do, is care more about the people than her jewels. And it works because
she needs direction.
She does. And he does it. It's so clever that he does it in a way where it's romanticizing not being beautiful and all dolled up. Because that probably wouldn't be super appealing to a young girl who is newly come into wealth, and that's kind of the only advantage of being this old man's wife.
Right. Yeah, it says a whole paragraph here that Fitz kind of just like intuits about her. It told of a common girl elevated too quickly and too far above her previous station. She was lonely and uncertain and uneducated as to what was expected of her. Worse, she knew that she was ignorant, and that knowledge ate at her and soured her pleasures with fear. If she did not learn how to be a duchess before her youth and beauty faded, only years of loneliness and ridicule could await her. She needed a mentor, someone secret like Chade. She needed the advice I could give her right now. So then he goes into his manipulations, and he recognizes that she needs help. I can't really give it to her, but I can give her a good leaping off point to make people view her differently. And she getting that direction is like, yes, I need something. This sounds great. And it appeals to her romantic side of that story of I can be the hero of the people. She kind of gets lost in her daydream there and says goodbye, dog boy, takes her dog back and just walks away, just probably humming to herself, wearing her blankets as a cloak. And Fitz makes his way back to bed, where he seems like he's immediately woken again.
Yeah, pretty much. Because Lady Time needs him.
Good old Lady Time. Smelly Lady Time. So he's woken up. He's not very happy about it and directed down to Lady Time's place, where he kind of gets lost a couple times, but eventually makes it in there.
I just think it's funny that he gets lost and is like, it's just different in the dark. Like, and it just seems like
I wasn't really paying attention, and it's different in the dark.
And I bet that's like justification because, Chade would be super disappointed in him for not knowing the way.
I do want to point out that Hans had Sudi saddled and ready, along with a ribald jest or two about my summons. I suggested how he might amuse himself for the rest of the night and then left. Oh, I can imagine what was said between the two.
Oh, yeah. Two teenage boys.
Yep.
Yep.
So Fitz knocks at the door and asks, Lady Time, what's wrong? And he just hears, boy. And he's like, oh, it's Chade.
Oh, you know. I mean, it says, and instantly I felt more foolish than I care to remember. And you just, you could feel it. Know.
Oh, my teacher got one up on me.
Mm-hmm. But Chade is nice about it. He's like, don't feel bad. Everybody falls for it. Hopefully it keeps happening that way. So
yeah,
no big deal. Which is surprisingly nice of Chade. Because I feel like of all the people in Fitz's life, Chade is for sure the first person to point out his flaws. And Chade means it to like help him recognize the flaw and get better. But it doesn't usually come off that way. So I was very pleasantly surprised that he was nice about this one.
He's a little preoccupied because this is where we learned that the Red Ship Raiders are raiding Forge.
Mm-hmm.
They're doing their first batch of forging, as it's later come to be known.
Yes.
And they've demanded a bunch of gold or they will return the hostages.
Yes.
Both of them are very confused about that.
Mm-hmm. Because what could it mean?
Yeah, exactly. Fitz is, directed to wrap things up for Lady Time.
Yeah. And this is where we find out how Chade is able to do whatever he needs to do as an assassin, whether that's acting as Lady Time or having her have one of her attacks,
right,
and using that to sneak around.
Yep.
Which answers my questions I think I had last time. So
yeah, and later he does mention that. I know you had a question about if he was there just to watch over Fitz,
mm-hmm.
and I know Fitz directly asks him about it, and
yep.
Jade's like, no, I just needed to talk to like women around the village because they know more usually than the lords.
Which I do want to say, that's an interesting tidbit because literally last chapter, Fitz found the understanding he needed as to what's really going on in this duchy because of the women talking about not being able to find linen, or like good linen cloth, because of the roads not being maintained.
Yeah,
and they didn't even know they were giving him a piece of a puzzle he didn't have. So I thought that was cool to bring back. And
in the description of Chade, he's described as ready to travel. He looked a different man suddenly, very fit and energetic. He glanced up at me, and for a moment I would have sworn it was Verity the soldier I was facing. It's just another hint that he is a farseer bastard, and Fitz doesn't know it yet.
Mm-hmm.
Just that family resemblance.
Mm-hmm. He wonders here if the old man is a facade that he's putting on, which is interesting that that's what he's focusing on and not how like he is to Verity. But
he's very caught up in, are people lying to me about who they are?
Yeah, which is really sad because he's pretty young and already can't trust anybody. But kind of Chade is putting on an act.
A little bit.
I don't think because, once he finally gets out of behind the walls, he's energetic and life filled. That's
true.
Not a good word,
true. But
so I'm just wondering if maybe he like plays up being like a feeble old man to be more comforting, and especially when he first met Fitz, to like help him let his guard down and to see Chade as friendlier. If that makes sense. I don't know.
No, it does make sense. I think it maybe partially, but I also think, he's been inside the walls for so long that when he does get let out, he gets some sun on himself that True. It just kind of helps reinvigorate his zeal for life. But this, I think, this energy, I believe, is from like Karis seed or something like
Yes.
that, because he has very weary side effects later on in this chapter. And I think just the burst of energy is him taking some drugs, basically.
I was thinking that too, because I don't know, we can get to it, but
Yeah. So they kind of talk about like this whole thing that's going on, why this is so odd, and that everything is planned out for them to go on this this hunt, basically, to forage, to scout it out, to see what's going on.
because they kind of want to figure out why it would be a bad thing to let the people come back.
Yeah, because it's really weird. But Chade normally wouldn't be worried about that. But the guy who delivered them, some of his family got taken, and he was extremely shook by the attitudes of the raiders. And so Chade is very convinced that it is, a credible threat, and they don't know exactly what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
So he's going to investigate for King Shrewd. All right, so everything's arranged, and it basically says that he did not play swiftly, but to win. So, they are being careful about their horses.
Yeah.
They're not galloping straight out because it's a very long journey. They're leaving in the middle of the night, maybe, 2, 3 in the morning.
Yeah.
And it's late afternoon or something by the time they get
Yeah. And I mean,
to a stop.
He even says, I will never forget that night ride, not because it was a wild gallop to the rescue, but because it was not. Chade guided us and used the horses as if they were game pieces on a board. And I think this idea of Chade being this like chess master and everybody else is just pieces in the game that Chade is playing is just really, really shown here.
Yeah,
just with
definitely.
how he's deciding to move on this in the best way. But yeah, Chade, CEO of everybody else is playing checkers, but I'm out here playing chess.
So there are a couple passages in here where it shows Chade getting more and more exhausted. It says by midday, the livid spots stood out starkly against his pale skin. He looked more bloodless than the fool. Dark circles underscored his eyes. And Chade is he's kind of bothered by Fitz's concern and his stares at him. So he's like, report to me. Like, just, concern yourself with what you did. Tell me what you did. Tell me what's going on. And Fitz explains everything, and Chade just has to laugh. He's like, it's the same luck your father had. Maybe your diplomacy in the kitchen's actually paid off, and this might fix everything. And then it continues on with Chade kind of monologuing here. And he is rambling on and on about different topics from topic to topic. He talks about how King Bounty decided that the skill wasn't to be learned anymore, which was the king that trained him as an assassin, Shrewd's father. And he talks about just random things, and Fitz is like, I've never heard him rambling like this before.
Yeah, this is where I really thought he was maybe using Karis seed or some other drug. Just because of how, so this conversation about that goes into the skill and how people used to be trained in skill, and King Bounty decided that it should stop because it's more elite if it's a secret. And it kind of seems like this is the sadness effect, right? Because we know Chade he was never allowed to train in the skill. And so I could see this conversation kind of winding around to like, because he even says like, I don't understand that point of view, that it's a better tool if it's elite. And maybe that's a little bit of the like anger that he feels for not being able to learn it. But he also goes on to talk about how Shrewd probably likes keeping it so elite because then the servant, his underlings, are kept wondering if he can actually pick up on what they were thinking without their uttering a word. And he says, yes, that would appeal to Shrewd. That would. And it kind of just, to me, read as like this rambling where you're like thinking about how, oh, I was never trained in this, and I know that I could do it if I was just trained. And I don't know why this won't change. And of course, it's because Shrewd is just happy to make people think he's more powerful than he is. And it just seems so dark and like such a different view than we normally hear Chade say, at least out loud, that really made me feel like this was like a Kerosene rant.
Do you think it was elf bark? Because elf bark is the one that makes you like depressed at the end of it.
That's right.
Kerosene just makes your body forget that you can get tired, and then you kind of collapse from exhaustion, which is what I thought this was.
I thought Kerosene also comes with a darkening mood. It's why they use it on the slaves in Chalced, because it keeps their spirits down, right? It keeps them working harder, and then their spirits are down, so they can't fight back.
You develop a dependence on it from what I kind of looked up, and if you have too much of it, you eventually can't really do any physical labor without it, because it's just like your body is used to it, basically.
Mm-hmm. I don't know. I know elf bark also brings dark moods, but I thought there was like a thing about...
I mean, let's be honest, this is probably a special blend of Chade's.
True. It's a little bit of both.
Fitz is always mentioning how secret recipes that Chade has that he brews in teas that he never knows what it's in it, because he doesn't recognize any of the herbs.
Yep. That's fair.
So, there's just more and more evidence that Chade is getting more and more exhausted. Like, something happens and he almost falls off his horse, and it's barely anything. He's kind of veering off the trails a little bit, where Fitz starts leading.
And Fitz offers to stop and rest for a bit. And Chade says, "Trust me, boy. I know what I can do, and I'm not so foolish as to attempt more than that." And quite obviously, he's wrong. But I do want to ask, do you think this is where Fitz gets the idea that he just has to push himself to his physical boundary? Like, over and over throughout this whole series, we see Fitz pushing himself, knowing full well that this isn't what he can do, whether that's because it's been a long time since he's been as fit or as young as he once was, or if it's just because he's tired. He's constantly pushing himself further and further past his own limitations. And I wonder if this is Shade's doing, not on purpose, but just by example.
Yeah, we know Fitz learns by example, clearly from this chapter.
Yes.
Inhabits Burek and then inhabits Chade. And you're probably right in that, because Chade right now is on the hunt for a mystery. He is trying to gain knowledge for his king to react to save part of his kingdom and his villagers. And he's extremely driven at this point. And Fitz can see that. And he's like, the things that you do for, the things that you need to get done.
Yeah.
And Fitz is extremely driven at various points in this series and does exactly what you said. So probably he learned by example. And I feel like I'm not so foolish as to attempt more than what he can do. I feel like that's brought up a couple times with Chade again and with Fitz at some point.
Yeah.
I feel like they I know what I'm doing kind of thing, but they always push it a little bit too far. So they eventually make their way to the beach, and Chade is very relieved, and he immediately goes in the boat and probably falls asleep, because he keeps saying that we have 5 or 6 hours to rest. Once we're across on the boat, it's fine, we'll just keep going. Yeah. And here we learn that Fitz is even too tired to reach out with the wit to, get the horses on.
Yeah, which is the first time he's ever had this problem.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering
exhausted.
I just wonder if that means that Fitz is really strong in the wit, and that he's able to constantly connect with animals and get across to them what he needs them to do, or if it's just because he's tired. And
I think it's just because he's tired. I feel like since he doesn't always reach out constantly because Burek is around sometimes, he's always been able to do it when he has.
Well, he still reaches out when Burek's around. He just has learned how to hone it in and make it smaller, so to say, when he reaches out, so that Burek doesn't notice as easily. So it's like not as deep of a connection, but he's still reaching out to animals.
Yeah, like the questing is what it's called, but they're still, Night Eyes and him are still yelled at repeatedly for being way too broad and yelling out their communication. So I feel like, one, Burek isn't very trained in it, obviously.
Right.
But two, Fitz, I feel like, is barely just getting away with it with Burek if he's doing that. And there's a couple times where he mentions that he feels fine questing out because Burek isn't there, kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like he's very restrained around Burek.
That's fair. I mean, he would have to be.
yeah, he would have to be. Yeah, so they finally get across and on the boat, and they're heading over to forage. Mm-hmm. And this is the kicking off point.
Yeah.
For the big conflict here.
And the only thing he's thinking about is how he's going to explain to Burek how they got salt water on the saddles.
Every bit of leather and every buckle on their harness. Thoughts are always to the animals.
Mm-hmm. Which, speaking of animals, so I was just thinking about this. Do you think when Fitz is feeling like what the animals are feeling, it's similar to how live ships work? Like when people are on live ships, to go back a little bit, whenever he's working on the dog, it says that he has to, it took all of his self-control to not feel the pain and fear that the dog was sending at him. And he was able to like steadily pull the bone out. So do you think that's really similar to how live ships act when they're sending their feelings to the crew when they feel uneasy or upset?
Probably. I mean,
it's just like a bigger scale.
Yeah, like they come from dragons.
Right.
Skill comes from dragons as far as we know.
Mm-hmm.
And the circle of magic that's mentioned later, I think. Mm-hmm. Chade kind of explains that they are all kind of connected, and I feel like you were right in that earlier episode where you said that the wit and the skill kind of share a border along that circle, so I feel like a lot of things are mixed in there. We don't really know how it works, but I would agree with that. That it's fairly similar, at least. We know the skill can go into different people's minds. We know the wit can, physically throw you back or, exude a feeling or a calm into animals, things like that. So it seems pretty similar to me. There's one big thing that I want to hint at before we wrap this up.
Yeah.
There is a point in here where they're discussing, where Chade is discussing and kind of complaining and wondering about how the raiders knew when to hit Forge. Mm-hmm. So Verity just left Buckkeep to go reprimand a man about not manning and defending the coast. The Red Ship Raiders hit at that exact time close to Buckkeep at a village where Verity can now be talked about as not defending his coast. Mm-hmm. And had just, gone to talk to a man about it. So he could be seen as a hypocrite by complete, quote, happenstance, And this is where my theory that the Queen and Regal are the spies already really comes into play. Because it feels to me that this is such a calculated move to undermine people's confidence in Verity, to get him removed from the line as well, so Regal could step up and step in. Mm-hmm. I feel like this is kind of hinted at, but it's my headcanon for sure that they are already in league with one another and they've been fed that information.
That's an interesting theory. No. I mean, I feel like for the most part, I'm on board with the fact that the pale woman just knows everything and is directing things. But I guess it would make way more sense if they could know more information. Because, I mean, how else would she know exactly when to go in? But it just, I think I have a hard time because I can't imagine the type of person you would have to be to, like, basically lead some of your own kingdom, what you want to be your kingdom, to lead them.
Coast folk.
Yes, but like to lead them to death, just to like slaughter some people to get a family member, well, I guess to Regal, a family member, out of the line of succession. Like, I just.
Well, Red Ship Raiders probably promised not to kill them if they paid the gold.
That's fair.
Or no,
like
it would
they
be the other way around.
Yeah.
If they met demands one way or the other, they wouldn't kill them.
Well, do you think? So do you think they know that the Red Ship Raiders have this stone, the forging stone?
I do not. I think they're just, they either, I don't remember how it worked, but they either approached them or got approached, and maybe by the pale woman herself, being like, these could be our people, to enact some change here. And they're like, this is good. We can undermine some faith and confidence in the current royal line. I don't believe it's the pale woman's prescience and her foresight for these like day-to-day raids, because everything that we get from the Fool is, yes, he's like kind of led to act in certain ways at certain times, but it's in big strokes. It's not in like, this day we do this, tomorrow I'll do another thing.
I don't think it's from what she's seeing. I think it's from the writings that have been made from the millions of whites that they grow. Because we know that they have such a huge library of every single prediction ever made, and I feel like that would be a pretty good roadmap if you had a basically mostly accurate telling of how you get, I don't know.
True. I just feel like it's not as, I just feel like the prophecies are more vague than what you're kind of portraying.
Well,
they feel like in the last trilogy, when we hear some of the scriptures that the whites read out to Linkstra Dwalia, it's more like poemy, flowery kind of language in the typical prophecy kind of thing. And even if millions and upon millions of predictions were laid on top of one another, there's tons of ways to interpret that, and they probably aren't day to day. They're just about various things that need to happen.
Right. But I'm saying, like, on the fourth raid of a red ship, the king is close by, and you weaken the throne or something is vague enough. And if it was like, they've been attacking this area so much, I don't know.
Could be.
I mean, I'm not saying that it like these predictions are, and on May 3rd.
Right, yeah.
I'm saying like there's so much information at their disposal that it would be really easy with all of that behind you to like navigate where you need to be when. But I also could see that it's probably because there's some sort of, well, because they end up with all the scrolls, right? The skill scrolls.
Yeah.
So they have to be, right? It just makes me so sad. I don't know. I hate it. As much as I don't like Regal or his mother, I hate the idea that they're just that okay with killing people just because they're from the outer duchies.
The inland duchies?
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I still prescribe subscribe to the I still subscribe to the theory, my own theory, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense.
About the spy.
And I believe, like, I'm sure you're right, but I don't want you to be right. Ugh.
And Fitz was feeling pretty good about himself this chapter.
Yeah.
He fixed something,
Helped the dog.
Helped the dog. Didn't have to kill anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't kill the dog.
Was super stealthy in the hallway.
Super stealthy. Finally got to eat.
Yeah. Finally got to eat. That would make him pretty happy.
Yeah. Is going on an adventure, but is also slightly worried at the end because Chade isn't looking too hot, and he doesn't know what this means. So.
Yeah, but I think he's happy.
Oh yeah, I think he's doing all right this one.
This is a fun adventure.
Yeah.
I mean, he's worried, obviously. I mean, Chade is worried, and that would be worrisome. But yeah, I think it's safe to say that Fitz is happy this episode.
Definitely. Thank you everybody who have rated and reviewed us so far. And thank you so much for sending some memes our way. We've laughed a lot about those.
Yes, they're very funny.
Maybe when, some of them are from the future, so maybe when we get to those parts, we might post a little bit of them. But yeah, pretty good so far. Thank you, everybody.
Got a great little community of memers.
Oh, God. If you want to argue with us about if there's a spy or if there is... prophecies telling you that on May 3rd they have to race.
on the 23rd year of our Lord Shrewd, we must hit Forge. That's the prophecy.
Yes, yeah. So if you want to do any of that, please let us know. Reach out to us at isfitzhappy@gmail.com or on any social medias at isfitzhappy.
Yeah, we look forward to conversing with you.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Hope to see you next time.